Hello guys. So this is going to be a quick video about the phenomena that we experience from time to time that is known as the ego death. Now, I'm not even sure if I should go here, but I'm just going to start with this. The reason I'm not even sure if I'm going to go here is because it's a bit of a trip before we even begin this trip. But anywho, is it even accurate to call it an ego death? Or is it more accurate to call it the appearance of an ego death? The perception of an ego death. The play of the mind that we refer to as an ego death. Because it depends what we reference as really real here. If we reference the play of the mind, the phenomena that it is, the ever-changing, ever doing its wild, it's just like wacky thing that doesn't have any real basis in the actual nature of reality. It's just like coming and going. It's just transient. It's just like appearing and then disappearing. It is and then it isn't. Now, is that real? Yeah. So, just gonna start there. But ego deaths. So my heart goes out to you who are going through one, past, present, future. It can feel like the worst thing in the world. It can be the biggest experience of suffering and pain and misery. It can just be the worst. But it can also, and it usually is, the gateway to the greatest freedom and the greatest liberation and the greatest encounter with what you actually are. Now, this is the opportunity of ego death, or the appearance of ego death, in my opinion, is the ability that it can give you to know the ever or the unchanging, ever impermanent, ever just doing its thing and being spacious and just not changeable and unaffected by all appearance, to know that eternal self, to know your actual nature, to know what you are before you appear in this human form. That is the opportunity of an ego death. That is the opportunity of all of this play of appearance. That is the opportunity of it. That is the opportunity of the unreal, the seemingly real anyways, is to know what is really real. What is real is not manifest. What is real is the unmanifest. And it is not necessarily what you see in front of your eyes, but it is where you see from, and it is that space, that all of this realm of seeing and things to be seen and capacity to see, all of that just comes from there. Anyway, so that is the opportunity of an ego death, is to really know yourself as deathless, eternal, unchangeable. And that is so liberating, because when you really see that view amongst the turmoil of the ego death, it's just like, hallelujah. It comes with the realization that, okay, what I am was never born, so can never die, is not affected by any of this. Because that's the reason why the ego death feels so fucking shitty. Because we think that there's actual life and death on the line. We think that there's something to lose. And it's painful. We are clinging on to a sense of life. And this sense of life is founded in what real life actually isn't. An appearance of life, an attempt to represent life. Life isn't its appearance, life is its essence. So the ego death invites you to let go of all appearances that you're clinging to, that are keeping you actually separate from the essence of yourself, And it's that essence of self we want to connect to, we want to acquaint with, and we want to know. That is the thing we're here for. We're not here to know ourselves within the play of personality, of identity, of manifested reality. It's interesting and all that. And there's things to do in the world, practically speaking, and energetically speaking as well. And we're here to go through an evolutionary journey together and to increase the vibe here on Earth. But at the same time, we can't get caught in the play. That's the problem. And this is the invitation of the ego death as well. Don't get caught in the play. So see that you're separate from it. It's just happening within you. It's just a phenomena. It's just an appearance as well. It's not this big, scary thing. It's not this thing. It's not this point of no return where you're gonna be eternally gone for. What you are cannot die. What you are in essence. This human can die. The mind can die. Now, the ego death, it's not the totality of the ego, the full dissolution of it, although you can have really big dissolutions of a big part of it at one go. And this will feel like what we could refer to as a big ego death. Actually, we're experiencing ego deaths and rebirths all of the time. The ego is just this thing that continuously fades away and is reborn. It's just a phenomena. It's actually not killable or completely dissolvable. The difference lies in your engagement with it, just how hooked that it has you, just how reactive you are to it. So the progression in being less hooked and less controlled by your ego is not one of not having an ego at all. It is what we think. It's actually having an ego, but it not having a hold of you. And being able to not enforce it or reinforce it and keep it alive and just keep it going and going and going and going and going. So this is the problem when you're in the process of the ego death, is that it's usually the process of the self that needs to die or needs to fade away that really wants to dissolve. It's the process that self is having that prolongs the attempt to remain alive, or that aspect of self to remain alive, and this keeps the suffering going because it's reinforcing the self that actually wants to fade away. And usually when you're going through an ego death, you really want to get somewhere. You want to get to the other side. You have a sense of what's going to be important to make you feel better and for you to feel liberated. But it's not the getting of that thing that's going to make you liberated. It's the letting go of the self that wants that thing. That is the liberation. So we often try to fix the what of our reality. And this is just an absolute I don't even know the word to describe it, but like it's just absolute shenanigans. It's like if you're trying to fix the what all the time, then it's like you're just caught in the illusion. You're caught in the illusion as fuck, basically. AF, caught in illusion, AF. It's all about the who, the self, the evolution of the self, the dropping of the version of self that needs that certain thing, or that craves that liberation. That's the ticket to liberation, is the letting go and the transcending of the self that is so insistent that they have to have it. That's the ticket to liberation. So when we work on the level of self, and this is the pitfall in the ego death experience, is that I'm trying to get a what to fix this thing. And you can't look to the what. The what's just going to keep you caught up in the shenanigans of the play. And that's the aim of the mind. The aim of the mind is to preserve its own life, to keep itself intact. It really, really thinks that it's so important that it lives. So I'm just thinking of a point I made earlier, and I wasn't sure if I covered the thing I wanted to cover, but it's just kind of, yeah, I want to bring that one back in again. So the ego death is not a totality of death of the ego. It's just an aspect. The death is just the fading away of a piece of conditioning, a piece of mental programming. And within the mental programming and within the conditioning, there exists a sense of self, a sense of identity, right? So that is what dissolves. That is what fades away. It's not you that's actually dying. It's just this sense of self that existed within a conditioning. So that's what's happening with the ego death. It's like that effect, that sense of self is fading away. So, and it can feel really dramatic when it's happening because the mind really doesn't want to dissolve. But you do. You want that aspect to dissolve. You want that aspect to be annihilated, because when it is annihilated, what remains? What's actually there? That's the thing you want to experience. So it will get really dramatic, and the mind will have a really compelling and dramatic narrative. And this is something you can pay attention to, guys. It's like when your mind is really dramatic and like screaming really loud, basically saying like, we're gonna die, we're gonna go insane, we're gonna spiral out of control, like we're insane, we're dying. Like people say all these things, usually around insanity, losing control, falling off the brink of sanity, dying, all these kind of things. They'll say these kind of things. Now the inquiry, the way to get yourself out of that loop, because you can't just be like, no mind, don't worry, we're not gonna die, like I know we're not gonna die. You're engaging in the narrative. It's like, now a little backstory how I discovered this. Balls deep in my own experience of the ego death as a gateway to recognize the eternal aspect of me that never lives, never dies, that is not affected by any of this. I was like, I wasn't like, but my mind is like, we're dying. And then like, it was, later on it was like, okay, we're already dead, like we're just dead. And then later on, it kind of, maybe it was another day later, it said, oh my god, we're dying. And I was like, hold on a second. You told me yesterday you were already dead. And then I realized, like, whoa, this is absolute nonsense. I was hooked. I can't believe I fell for this shit. Now, I've experienced senses of self that were dying before, and had this very visceral feeling I was dying. And it's like, I passed through the death portal, it's fine. But it had never been playing out this intensely before for me. So I was like, you told me you were already dead. You're full of shit. This is just the mind. I see you. And now it is time to say goodbye to you. And so, and mind you, I was suffering a lot. I was feeling like really, like this was the hardest thing I ever went through in my life, my little life. I was really, this sucked so much. And I just said to myself, so all right then, you're dying, but then who is the self that is dying? Who is the self that is having this experience? And it was just like a void opened up inside me, or like a great expanse just opened up. That inquiry was like a little chisel hammer, and it just like cracked the reality of this travail I was going through. And it was like this great expanse opened up and swallowed that me whole. It sounds very dramatic, but that's literally what I felt like. It swallowed me whole. And that was it. Then I experienced not being in that sense of aliveness, or that sense of self. Because when you really feel yourself in that eternal space, you recognize the sense of aliveness and the sense of dyingness is the same illusion. So I just stayed there for a couple of days in this experience that felt like I was in between death and rebirth, and in a bardo of sorts. And it was the most sublime liminality ever. It was just awesome. And it was just like, okay, how could I have been so foolish? Like, what I am doesn't die or is never born. It's not affected by any of this play. And then this is the only way the ego death, or the fading away of the mind, can have a hold on you, is in the place that you think you're affected by it. You think that you're going to be harmed by it. That's the only way that it has control over you. But when I got to that place, it was like none of that could touch this. It was all just a fart in the wind. It was like a speck on the window screen. It was so minuscule in comparison to the great expanse, the great eternity. And now this expansion of your view of self can only happen if you unhook yourself from the narrative and the sense of self that's playing itself out, and you know yourself beyond it. And through that, you're able to gaze and pierce through that sense of self, that appearance. It's able to disintegrate and dissolve and lose its hold. So now that's a self-inquiry, right? It's a dissolution of the self with the problem, the small self, and the opening up for the space of the self that wanted to emerge. And this is actually what we want. We want this smaller sense of self that is based in conditioning and all of this, what's that word I'm looking for? All of this conditional, it has these conditional views of your well-being and all that stuff. You want to be free from that, because the eternal self, what you really are, is not subject to any of those conditions of well-being. It is not affected. It is unaffected. And when we rest in that space, we're able to see that, oh, okay, this is all just a play. This is a play of the mind across the screen of life. And isn't it wonderful? But it's nothing. It's nothing compared to what I am. And then it doesn't have a hold on you. You're not worrying that I'm gonna go insane, that I'm gonna die. I mean, your personality and your identity will die one day, and that will be sad. And we need to live fully as these identities and like really embrace and lean into these vehicles, because there will be a relative death one day. And yes, just because we are these eternal selves doesn't mean that this relative self isn't important. It is, but you can't let the importance control you and get ahead of you. You gotta stay ahead of it. And this is the way to play the game of life, is from being awake in the game and continuously becoming awake and reminding yourself to stay awake in the game. That's the only way you can properly lean into your lived experience and your expression. Because if you don't recognize that you are the space that it all comes from, and this is just an appearance, it's not that important, it's not that significant, then it's always going to have a hold on you. And that's going to make you suffer, because it's own veil that keeps you out of alignment with your actual energy, and it creates a jarring effect. So ground down into what you really are in this now, in this identity, but know and recognize a true view of you, where you come from, what you are, and lean into the play, lean into the experience. All is going to be good. So easy to be so concerned with the new version of yourself, the self you want to transform into, the new expression. But guys, this is the way the mind wants to hijack and control transformation. It's more about the death. It's more about the annihilation of that self, the emergence of the new one. And this is the only way you can stay awake in the game of life, is to recognize that you are free from rebirth and death as well. It's I think it's kind of important that we know this. So I think let's take a moment. You can close your eyes. And I just want us all to sit. Take it easy. Let yourself sink in. You might find a sense of ease in all of this. I mean, I do. I feel when I remove myself from this play of the person and I rest in the eternal space, and I know what I am. And when you rest in this place, and note that I'm really inviting you to rest here. I'm not inviting you to get into a particular state or to try to become a certain way. Just rest. Let your awareness relax. And just sit with the feeling that this video has brought you to, and let that energy, that transmission from you, yourself, capital S, your greater aspect, your eternal being, let that transmission of energy from your eternal aspect inform the rest of your being. And let your mind relax in that. And now please stay here for as long as you feel. Soften the hold your mind has on you and let yourself be guided to drop in deeper into this space from an inner pull. And the inner pull says when you're done, not the mind. Okay? Make space for this as much as possible. But I will love you and leave you here. And you can stay here for as long as you need. Thank you guys for watching. If anyone has any questions, please comment and I'll get back to you. Goodbye.